Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Living Islam in America, Season 2. I'm your host, Johari Abdul Malik. Last season on Living Islam in America, we hosted an invigorating two-part discussion about radicalization of Muslim youth. Our panelists discussed the recent spate of terrorism cases involving U.S. citizens and, more specifically, young Muslim men. While we may not have come to any concrete conclusions, what we did do was just as important. We began a dialogue. We all agreed that American Muslims need to be at the forefront of these conversations, and the recent developments in the U.S. House of Representatives have made the point even more poignant. Citing claims that Muslim leaders have been, quote, uncooperative in terror investigations, the incoming chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee has called for an open congressional inquiry into what he calls the radicalization of the Muslim community in America. On today's program, our guests will continue that conversation that we began last season in light of the new atmosphere. All that and more coming up next on Living Islam in America.
Living Islam in America has been sponsored in part with the generous support of the Odyssey Networks.
And by Banneker Ventures, transforming neighborhoods, changing the world, one community at a time.
When my friend came up to me and told me that Sean Powell was on the list, I took out my phone and I called him. That's really when it hit me and I was like, okay, this is real. I'm a New York City firefighter, and I responded to 9/11, and I am a Muslim.
Despite assumptions to the contrary, according to one of our panelists, there exists a well-established pattern of cooperation between Muslim congregations in the U.S. and law enforcement officials. At least 1/3 of all of the potential incidents that have been averted through the active and vigilance of self-patrolling Muslim communities. There still remains, however, much more to be done. Opening congressional inquiries to posit the idea that American Muslim community is actually a suspect puts us in an unfair light. Being suspicious of an entire group only sparks tension between law enforcement officials and the American Muslim community. This tension has the potential to feed the flame that we are trying to extinguish. Radicalization of Muslim youth and incidents of homegrown terrorism. I'd like to welcome back Imam Mahdi Bray, longtime friend and civil and human rights activist, currently serving as the executive director of the Mass Freedom Foundation, a Washington, D.C.-based civic and human rights advocacy entity for the Muslim American Society. Also joining us via Skype, you know we're high-tech here, is Dr. Ali Shahada. In addition to being a board-certified family physician, Dr. Shahada has spent the past 12 years studying Islam under an array of authentic Islamic scholars. He is an instructor in the Al-Maghrib Institute, a young mentor, and a writer for the weblog MuslimMatters.org. Dr. Shahada is also the author of a best-selling book, Demystifying Islam, Your Guide to the Most Misunderstood Religion of the 21st Century. But before we start our conversation, we're going to go to a video clip of the new movie out, Muslim, that will help to put this dialogue in context. We'll be right back.
I just don't know what I'm doing here. Tariq Mahdi right there.
You're in room 512.
You my neighbor, dog. You want a drink? It was the first time I ever drank.
You're a virgin too, right?
What?
You want to dance next song?
I've never been to anything like this before.
This is a melting pot. That's where we live.
Well, you might want to think about reining things in a little. What is your deal, huh?
I thought we both requested Muslim roommates, so...
My father requested a Muslim roommate.
Get your kufi and put it on your head.
Yes, sir. The kids at school give them a hard enough time.
It's a Muslim name!
You can call me T.
I'm sure your mother didn't name you T.
Why haven't you come to see us?
Ever since that boy was born, you've been trying to create a carbon copy of yourself.
My boy's gonna be a hafiz of the Quran.
I hear you're doing very well.
I'm really happy it's working out, Hassan.
You used to call and sound happy. What happened there?
I'm Tariq.
I'm Muslim. I'm Catholic. I'm not supposed to be talking to you.
I am here to pick up my son.
I don't want nothing to do with this, and I want nothing to do with you guys. Stay away from me, you hear me?
Are you losing your mind?
Let's at least take off our scarves. We will not.
I am the law today.
You have no idea what I've been through. Who did this to you?
I'm so sorry.
I beg you, do not let a few people shape your view on an entire faith.
Welcome back. This clip that we just showed really sort of typifies the stress, the challenges in the post 9/11 reality for young Muslims, especially young Muslim men. A young man who his identities as a Muslim are being challenged by people in the society. He's trying to go to college, he's trying to do the right things, but he's got pressure coming from everywhere. And as we've seen in many of these issues now, they are both expected to be patriotic while being a suspect. Maddie Bray, where are we at now in terms of the Muslim context around a community that's now deemed as radical?
Well, we're dealing with stereotypes that are not untypical for our nation. The good thing about it, that's the bad news. The good news is that we've always been able to overcome these elements and continue to strive.
When you say we, you mean America?
Yeah, in terms of as Americans, you know, and so I think that one of the things that is the challenge, to be able to overcome the stereotypes. I mean, this is, you know, in terms of, I always tell people, you know, you've heard me say it so many times, you know, I have the double whammy. I have to worry about driving while black and flying while Muslim. So the whole idea of being stereotyped both, you know, by the society as well as by the popular culture, maybe the media, et cetera, it's not a new thing to America. It's been done to the Native Americans, African Americans, Jewish communities. I mean, you name it, you know, and so Asians, you know, and so these type of things happen. But
I thought about a metaphor the other day about this. Every community in America has to get that heavyweight belt. You know what I'm saying? And some point you gotta go in and defend your title. And if you're not willing to do that in America, as you said, America's not America doesn't like
wimps. You know what I'm saying? Or as Fannie Lou Hamer used to say, people have to get sick and tired of being sick and tired.
That's right.
So I think that's an aspect that we have to deal with. But I think we're up to the task. And I think there's I noticed that in your introduction you were talking about Peter King wanting to do this investigation thing. Certainly Peter King has shown that he has a proclivity of ignorance about the American Muslim community, and I use that in a very generous way, not in a pejorative way, but nevertheless, he's been able to demonstrate that, you know. And
you mean that's lack of knowledge?
Yeah, right. Yeah. But now that we're coming into the new House of Representatives, unfortunately, there are people like Peter King, you know, who will have the bully pulpit in order to be able to deal with that. So I think it's But however, I know that it's disingenuous to say that Muslims have not been in the forefront of trying to police their communities. In fact, the contradiction is that fact that even though Peter King makes this claim, the 9/11 report highlights my organization, Muslim American Society, Muslim Public Affairs Council, PBS, talks about programs that we're doing to deal with, preventing young people from going into...
What is it called? Because you have new programs.
Straight Path, yeah, Straight Path. Yeah.
But what Al-Maghrib, Shahada, you're involved in Al-Maghrib youth group, engaging young people to really understand the real Islam. But how are the young people that you're dealing with responding to this pressure?
The pressure, it's what's interesting. It's kind of scary at the same time, and I think that there's a level of sticking our head in the sand on this issue as a Muslim community. Is that there's a lot of sympathy out there for the extreme, and we're not addressing it. And
when you say there's sympathy for the extreme, what do you mean?
When we look at extremists, okay, when I look at someone like, for example, Anwar al-Awlaki, and I see like, well, how did he get to where he got? What I find is that there's usually there's stages, and so the first stage is sympathy, where a person becomes a sympathizer with these actions. They don't agree with the methodology, but they agree with the final goal. They feel that these people are real men, and they're standing up, and they're
based on what? Is this Quranically based, or what is this?
It's emotionally. Where's it coming from? Entirely emotionally based.
Oh.
Entirely emotion.
But the sympathy.
Let Maddie.
But the sympathy, I would beg to argue, centers around something that I think people who have problems with dealing with the whole concept of injustice in society, be they Muslim or non-Muslim, the sympathy is towards the whole concept of dealing with injustice. And see, Al-Awlaki and them, they frame what I call a negative narrative within that positive framework that we're dealing with injustice, because you can't deny that there is an element of injustice in America, a place of society where the rich get bail and sale and the poor get jail and hell.
Yeah.
So
I think that's left over from your civil rights work.
Right. But my point is this: these inequities within the societal structure don't go unnoticed by young people, whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim.
And that young people have found that there's no place in the traditional framework that they can have that conversation, except on the web with people like my ex-friend Anwar al-Awlaki.
Yes, they have that idea that they can only go on there, and so you look at the forums and you find, well, why aren't these people coming into the masajid? Why aren't they coming to the classes? Why don't we encounter them? And usually what it is because they feel that a lot of the people in the masajid, they call them sellouts. They say, you guys aren't real Muslims, and so so they feel like we need to look elsewhere, and so they find these people living in caves, and these people who are
romanticized. Yeah,
romanticized.
I think this is an important point to note that they've now shown, studying some of these cases of young men, that they're not really religious people.
No, they're not.
They're young
at all.
people who are moved by what you're talking about, Mehdi, passion, that people are dying, people are suffering, and what happens with that pain if it's not treated, and I think that if people aren't treated for this kind of grief, they're in denial, and then they move to other stages.
But Imam Jawhari, I think it goes well beyond just the feeling of injustice. This is actually strongly an inferiority complex. People are saying, how dare you do this to me? I'm a Muslim, and we have this rich, glorious history. And
Dr. Shahada, I hate to do this to you, but we're gonna have to go to a break, and we'll be right back.
Okay.
This is Living Islam in America.